What if Snape raised Harry after Lily died? Severus Snape arrived at Godric's Hollow 17 minutes after the explosion. He did not apparate to the front door. He apparated to the lane behind the cottage, because Severus Snape had been a spy for long enough to know that front doors were for people who expected to be welcomed, and he did not expect to be welcomed anywhere ever again. The house was destroyed. Not completely, the walls still stood, or most of them but the upper floor had been blown outward, as if something inside the building had detonated with a force that was not physical but magical. A release of energy so profound that the structure could not contain it. Roof tiles lay scattered across the garden, a window hung at an angle from its frame, swinging gently in the October wind. The front door was open. Snape walked through the gate. His robes were wet. It had been raining in the Scottish Highlands where he had received the message, the terrible, impossible, soul-destroying message that had sent him running through the corridors of Hogwarts and out into the night, and they dragged against the garden path as he walked. He found James Potter first. James was at the foot of the stairs, face up. Glass wand 3 feet from his hand, as if he had been reaching for it when the curse hit, or as if death had loosened his grip and the wand had rolled away on the hardwood floor. His eyes were open. The expression on his face was not fear, it was defiance. The arrogant, infuriating, magnificent defiance of a man who had stood between a dark wizard and his family without a wand in his hand, and had not flinched. Snape looked at James Potter's body and felt nothing. This was a lie. He felt something. A complicated, toxic, shameful cocktail of emotions that included satisfaction and horror and grief and guilt, and the guilt was the worst part, because the guilt was not for James. The guilt was for himself, for the part of him that had looked at the body of a dead man and felt, before anything else, before the horror and the shame, a flicker of something that was almost relief. He stepped over the body, climbed the stairs. The nursery door was open. He stopped. He could smell it. The particular acrid electric smell of dark magic discharged at close range. The smell of the killing curse, which he had encountered many times in the service of the Dark Lord, a smell like ozone and burnt hair, and something else, something underneath, something that smelled like the absence of life itself. He walked into the nursery. Lily? He was on the floor beside the crib. Red hair fanned across the carpet. Green eyes open, staring at the ceiling with the fixed, empty gaze of someone who is no longer present in their body. Her hand was reaching upward, toward the crib, toward the child she had been trying to protect, and the hand was still extended, frozen in the last gesture of a woman whose final act on earth had been to reach for her son. Snape fell. Not collapsed. Not sank. Fell, his legs simply stopped working. The way legs stop working when the mind that controls them has received information so devastating that it cannot process physical commands and emotional annihilation simultaneously. He fell to his knees beside Lily Potter's body, and he gathered her in his arms, and he pressed his face against her hair, and he made a sound that was not a word, and was not a scream, and was not silence, but was something between all three. The sound a human being makes when the thing they love most in the world is gone, and the world has become a place that no longer contains reasons to exist in it. He held her for a long time. The room was cold. The October wind came through the destroyed wall and moved the curtains and touched his face, and he did not feel it. Then the baby cried. Harry James Potter was 15 months old. He was standing in his crib, holding the bars with both hands, his face red and wet with tears. There was a cut on his forehead, a deep, angular wound in the shape of a lightning bolt, still bleeding, the blood running down between his eyes and dripping off the bridge of his nose. The child was alive. This was impossible. The killing curse did not leave survivors. The killing curse did not leave marks. The killing curse killed. That was its entire purpose, its sole function, the single thing it did with perfect, unfailing efficiency. And yet here was a child, alive, crying, bleeding from a wound that looked like it had been carved by lightning. Snape stood, looked at the baby. The baby looked at him. Green eyes. Lily's eyes. The eyes that Snape had loved since he was 9 years old, looking at him from the face of James Potter's son. Something broke inside Severus Snape. Not the thing that had already broken, the thing that had been breaking since the moment he heard the prophecy and realised what he had done. The thing that had shattered completely when he walked into this nursery and found Lily dead. Something else broke. Something deeper. The last wall. The final barrier between the person Snape had been the Death Eater, the spy, the man who had sold a family to a Dark Lord for the promise of sparing the woman he loved and the person he was about to become. He reached into the crib, picked up the child. The baby stopped crying, looked at him with those green eyes, enormous and trusting and completely unaware that the man holding him was responsible for the chain of events that had killed both his parents. "I'm sorry," Snape said. The baby grabbed his nose. Albus Dumbledore arrived at Godric's Hollow 40 3 minutes after the explosion. He found the house. Found James. Climbed the stairs. Found Lily. Did not find Harry. The crib was empty. The blankets were disturbed. There was blood on the white sheet, a small amount, consistent with a wound, not with death. The child had been here. The child had been alive. And someone had taken him. Dumbledore stood in the nursery and felt something he had not felt in a very long time. Not since the night in Godric's Hollow with Grindelwald and Aberforth and Ariana. Not since the night everything went wrong. Fear. He cast tracking charms, detection spells, residue analysis. The magical signature in the room was Complex the Dark Lord's magic, Lily's sacrificial protection, the rebounded curse, but underneath it all, barely perceptible, like a whisper in a thunderstorm, was a trace. Familiar, distinctive, a magical fingerprint that Dumbledore recognised immediately because he had been reading it for 10 years. Severus Snape. Spinner's End. 2 o'clock in the morning. November 1st, 1981. The house was exactly what it had always been. Small, dark, crammed with books, smelling of potions, ingredients and dust, and the particular kind of loneliness that seeps into walls when a building has been occupied by unhappy people for too long. The sitting room had a fireplace that did not draw properly, 2 armchairs with stuffing leaking from their seams, and a bookshelf that covered an entire wall and contained texts that ranged from standard Hogwarts curriculum to materials that would have earned their owner a cell in Azkaban. Snape sat in one of the armchairs. The baby was asleep in his arms. The cut on the baby's forehead had stopped bleeding, but the wound had not closed, it remained open, red and angry, and when Snape had attempted to heal it with a standard wound-closing charm, the magic had simply bounced off, absorbed by whatever protection was already embedded in the scar. He sat and held the child and tried to think. He had not planned this, had not intended to take the boy. He had gone to Godric's Hollow to find Lily, and he had found her and she was dead, and then the baby had cried, and he had picked it up, and then he had left. The decision, if it could be called a decision, had been made somewhere beneath the level of conscious thought in the part of the brain that operates on instinct and grief and the desperate animal need to save something, anything, when the thing you most wanted to save is already gone. Now he was sitting in his house with a stolen child and no plan and the certain knowledge that Albus Dumbledore would come looking. The fireplace erupted in green flame. Severus, Dumbledore's head appeared in the fire. The blue eyes, usually twinkling, were not twinkling. They were ice. "Where is the boy? He is here. Bring him to me." No. Silence. The fire crackled. The baby shifted in Snape's arms, made a small sound, settled again. "Severus," Dumbledore said, and his voice had changed. No longer ice. Something more complex. You understand what that child is. You understand what happened tonight. The Dark Lord attempted to kill him. The curse rebounded. The Dark Lord is gone. The Dark Lord is not gone. He is diminished, reduced but not gone, and the child is the reason. The child is the key to everything that comes next. Then the child should be protected. That is exactly what I intend to do. I have arrangements. The boy's aunt, his mother's sister. There is a protection in Lily's sacrifice, a blood protection that can be anchored through her living relatives. The boy must go to Petunia Dursley. Snape's face did something that the fire could not quite capture. A shift. A hardening. No, he said. Severus, I know Petunia. I grew up on the same street. I watched her torment Lily for years. She called her a freak. She was jealous and cruel and small-minded, and she married a man who is worse. That woman will not raise Lily's son. The blood protection can be anchored through me. Dumbledore was quiet. I was with Lily since we were 9 years old, Snape said. I introduced her to magic. I was the first person to tell her what she was. Our magical signatures are intertwined at a fundamental level. 9 years of proximity, of shared magic, of he stopped, swallowed, of love. The protection Lily created can be sustained through magical kinship as effectively as through blood. I can provide that kinship. You are a Death Eater, Severus. I am whatever you need me to be. I have been whatever you needed me to be for 2 years. I spied for you. I risked my life for you. I gave you everything you asked for, and it was not enough. Because she is dead. And I will carry that guilt for the rest of my life. But I will not hand her son to Petunia Dursley. I will not condemn this child to be raised by people who will hate him for what he is. And you will love him? The question hung in the firelit room like smoke. I will protect him, Snape said. That is not what I asked. It is the best I can offer. Dumbledore was silent for a very long time. The fire flickered. The baby slept. Outside, the November wind rattled the windows of Spinner's End. Very well, Dumbledore said. But there are conditions. Name them. You will continue to teach. The boy will need protection there, and I will need you close. You will maintain your cover as a former Death Eater. Your loyalty to me must remain secret, even from the boy, for as long as possible. And you will prepare him, Severus, not just to survive, to fight. Because the Dark Lord will return, and when he does, Harry Potter will be the only person who can stop him. I understand. One more thing. The scar. Do not attempt to remove it. Do not study it. Do not, under any circumstances, try to understand what it is. There are things about this child's survival that I do not yet understand, and until I do, the scar must remain undisturbed. Snape looked at the baby in his arms, at the lightning bolt wound, red and raw against the pale skin. Agreed, he said. The fire went out. Snape sat in the chair and held Lily's son, and listened to the wind and the silence and the small, regular breathing of a child who did not know that his life had just been rewritten by a man who had loved his mother and hated his father, and would spend the next decade trying to figure out what exactly he felt about the combination. The first year was the hardest. Not because of the child. The child was, by all reasonable standards, remarkably easy. Harry slept through the night by December. He ate whatever was placed in front of him without complaint, a trait that Snape attributed to Lily's practicality rather than James's undoubtedly more theatrical approach to mealtimes. He was quiet, observant, and had a habit of watching Snape with those green eyes in a way that was simultaneously comforting and devastating. The hardest part was the grief. Snape had not expected this. He had expected guilt, which was familiar guilt had been his constant companion since the night he overheard the prophecy and delivered it to the Dark Lord. He had expected anger, which was also familiar anger at himself, at Dumbledore, at the Dark Lord, at James Bloody Potter, for not having the sense to run when running might have saved all of them. He had expected regret, which was so deeply embedded in his psyche that it had become structural, a load-bearing wall in the architecture of his personality. But grief, raw, physical, incapacitating grief he had not expected. It came in waves. Unpredictable, he would be brewing a potion in the kitchen, the baby playing on a blanket nearby, and suddenly the room would tilt and the air would thicken and his hands would start shaking so badly that he had to set down whatever he was holding or risk dropping it, and the grief would crash over him like a wave, and he would stand at the counter with his eyes closed and his hands braced against the edge and wait for it to pass. It always passed. This was the cruel thing about grief, it always passed. Not because the pain diminished, but because the body could not sustain that level of anguish indefinitely, and so the wave would recede, and Snape would open his eyes, and the baby would be looking at him with those green eyes, and the day would continue. He set up a nursery in the spare bedroom. It was not a beautiful nursery. Snape's aesthetic sensibility ran toward dark wood and leather-bound books and the muted colours of a man who had spent his adult life in dungeons, but it was functional. A crib that he transfigured from an armchair. A mobile that he charmed to rotate slowly, showing constellations that Lily had loved. A rocking chair that he found in the attic. Dust that had belonged to his mother. He fed the baby formula that he brewed himself, modified with precisely calibrated nutritional supplements, because Snape did not trust Muggle baby food, and wizard baby food was criminally overpriced. He changed nappies with a clinical efficiency that suggested extensive practice, though in truth he had learned from a book, Practical Infant Care, which had been one of 12 books he purchased from Flourish and Blotts the morning after taking Harry, in a shopping trip that the bookshop owner would remember for years as the most incongruous purchase in the store's history. He talked to the baby. This was unexpected. Snape was not a talker. He was, by nature and training, a man of few words, each one chosen with the precision of a potion's ingredient, measured, weighed, deployed for maximum effect. But the baby seemed to respond to his voice, calmed when he spoke, fussed when he was silent, and so Snape talked. He told the baby about potions, about the properties of moonstone, the uses of bezoars, the precise stirring technique required for Draught of Living Death. He told the baby about the magical world about Hogwarts, its castle and grounds, and the lake that contained a giant squid, and the forest that contained things that were better left alone. He told the baby about Salazar Slytherin and Godric Gryffindor and their irreconcilable differences, about Helga Hufflepuff's insistence that everyone deserved a chance, and Rowena Ravenclaw's belief that wisdom was the highest virtue. He did not tell the baby about Lily. Not yet. That wound was too fresh, too raw, too close to the surface. He would press against it accidentally, a flash of red hair, the smell of the particular flowers she had liked, the sound of a laugh that was nothing like hers but reminded him anyway, and the grief would rise, and he would have to stop talking and hold the child and breathe until it passed. But sometimes, late at night, when the baby was sleeping and the house was quiet and the darkness pressed against the windows like something alive, Snape would sit in the rocking chair beside the crib and look at the child and say, very quietly, "You have her eyes." It was not a comfort, it was a fact. And facts, unlike emotions, could be managed. Harry's first word was no. This was appropriate, Snape reflected, given the circumstances. The child was 2. They were in the kitchen of Spinner's End. Snape had placed a bowl of porridge in front of Harry, and Harry had looked at it with an expression of such total, uncompromising rejection that Snape, who had faced down Death Eaters and Dark Lords and Dumbledore's most penetrating stares, found himself momentarily at a loss. "No," Harry said. "It is porridge. You like porridge. No, you ate porridge yesterday. You ate it the day before. You have eaten porridge every morning for the past 6 months without complaint. No, Snape looked at the child. The child looked at Snape. Green eyes, stubborn jaw, the particular set of the mouth that suggested the discussion was over and that further negotiation would be not only pointless but beneath consideration. You are exactly like your mother, Snape said. Harry ate the porridge. Harry's first accidental magic happened at 3. He was angry Snape had taken away a book that Harry wanted to look at, a book about advanced potion making that contained illustrations of ingredients that were, in Snape's professional opinion, unsuitable for a toddler, and the anger had manifested as a shockwave of raw magical energy that knocked every book off the sitting room shelf and shattered the window facing the street. Snape repaired the window, reshelved the books, sat down in his armchair, and looked at the child, who was sitting on the floor surrounded by fallen volumes, with an expression of surprise and the beginnings of fear. "Don't be afraid," Snape said. Harry's lower lip trembled. "What you just did is called accidental magic. It happens to young witches and wizards when their emotions become overwhelming. It is normal. It is a sign that you possess significant magical ability. I broke the window. Windows can be repaired. Talent cannot be manufactured. You have nothing to apologize for." Harry looked at him. And for the first time, Snape saw something in those green eyes that was not Lily. Something that was uniquely distinct, a quality that Snape would later identify as resilience, the ability to experience fear and move through it, to be knocked down and get up, to break something and immediately begin figuring out how to fix it. "Can I do it again?" Harry asked. "Absolutely not." "Please?" "No. Go wash your hands. We're making a potion." "What kind of potion?" "A simple one. Headache cure. You are going to learn the difference between clockwise and counterclockwise stirring, which is the foundation of all competent potion making. I'm 3. Mozart composed his first piece at 5. I expect better from you." Harry did not compose, but he did learn to stir clockwise and counterclockwise, and by the age of 4, he could identify 12 common potion ingredients by sight and smell, and by 5 he had brewed his first complete potion, a simple antiseptic under Snape's supervision, with only 3 mistakes, all of which Snape corrected, with a patience that surprised him, because he had not known. The neighbourhood children did not play with Harry. This was partly because Spinner's End was not a neighbourhood that encouraged play. The houses were grey, the streets were grey, the sky above the mill was grey, and the people who lived there moved through their days with the dull, resigned efficiency of people who have accepted that this is what life looks like, and that expecting more is a luxury they can. But it was mostly because of Snape. The neighbours knew that a man lived in the house at the end of the row, a thin, dark-haired man who dressed in black and kept his curtains drawn and emerged rarely and spoke to no one. A man who, according to local rumour, was either a recluse or a drug dealer or both. A man who, 3 years ago, had appeared one morning with a baby, and no, the mothers on the street drew their children away from the house at the end of the row. The fathers muttered about social services. Nobody knocked. Nobody asked. Snape was aware of this. He did not care. The opinions of Muggles were, to him, roughly as relevant as the opinions of furniture. But Harry noticed. Harry, at 5, noticed the way other children crossed the street when they saw the way their mothers pulled them closer, the way the man at the corner shop looked at Snape with suspicion and at Harry with pity, as if the child were a prisoner rather than a... "Why don't they like us?" Harry asked one evening, sitting at the kitchen table, drawing pictures of potion ingredients with coloured pencils. Snape looked up from the essay he was grading. "Who?" "The people. The neighbours. They look at us funny. People look at what they do not understand. We are different from them. We always will be. Because of magic? Because of many things. Magic is part of it. The rest is simply the way the world works. People fear what is unfamiliar. They avoid what they cannot categorize. We are uncategorizable, you and I. We exist outside their framework. Is that bad? Snape considered this. It is lonely, he said, but it is honest. And honesty, in my experience, is worth more than belonging. Harry looked at him with those green eyes. Then he went back. He had drawn a bezoar. It was not anatomically accurate, but the proportions were better than most first years managed, and Snape felt something that was very close to pride. He did not say this. Snape did not say things like that. But he kept the drawing. Filed it between the pages of advanced potion making, where it would remain for the next 20 years. The conversation about Lily happened when Harry was sick. It could not be postponed any longer. Harry had found a photograph. It was in a book in the sitting room. Snape had placed it there years ago, tucked between the pages of a text on charm theory, because he could not bring himself to display it openly, but could not bear to put it away entirely. A photograph of a young woman with red hair and green eyes, laughing at something outside, her face turned 3/4 toward the camera, beautiful and alive and impossibly, permanently gone. "Who is this?" Harry asked. Snape was at his desk. He turned, saw the photograph in Harry's hands, and the wave came the grief wave, the one he had learned to manage, the one that came less frequently now, but was no less devastating when it arrived. He breathed. "Once." "That is your mother," he said. Harry stared at the photograph, then at Snape, then at the photograph again. "She looks like me. You look like her. You have her eyes. Where is she?" "She died. The night I brought you here. She died protecting you." Harry's face did something complicated. Not grief he had never known her, could not grieve for someone he had never met, but something. A recognition, perhaps, of absence. The understanding that there was a person-shaped space in his life that should have been filled and was not. How did she die? A dark wizard killed her. A very powerful, very evil man who wanted to kill you. Your mother stood between you and him and refused to move. She knew she would die. She chose to die rather than her sacrifice created a magical protection that saved your life and destroyed the dark wizard. What was his name? Voldemort. Harry flinched. Not at the name. He had never heard it before, had no reason to fear it. He flinched at the way Snape said it. The flat, careful, controlled way that suggested the word contained enough pain to level a building if spoken carelessly. "And my father?" Snape's face, the stillness of a man choosing his words with extraordinary care. "Your father was James Potter. He was a wizard. He died the same night, fighting the same man. He died bravely. Did you know him?" "Yes, were you friends?" "No." Harry waited. Snape did not elaborate. "I will tell you more when you are older," Snape said. "For now, know this. Your mother was the bravest and most brilliant person I have ever known. She loved you more than anything in the world. And I made her a promise the night she died that I would keep you safe. I intend to keep that promise." "What about my dad?" "Your father was a complicated man. I will tell you about him honestly when you are ready to hear it." "When will I be ready?" "When you are old enough to understand that people are not simply, that everyone is both, in different proportions, and that loving someone does not require you to agree with everything they did." Harry considered this. At 6, he understood perhaps a third of it, but the third he understood the part about his mother being brave and loving him was enough. "Can I keep the photograph?" he asked. Yes. Harry took the photograph to his room and placed it on the table beside his bed, where he could see it when he woke up. And every morning for the next 5 years, the first thing Harry Potter saw when he opened his eyes was his mother's face, laughing at something outside the frame, beautiful and alive and impossibly permanently gone. Snape taught Harry occlumency at 7. This was, by any standard, absurdly young. Occlumency was an advanced discipline that most adult wizards could not master. It required mental control, emotional regulation, and a degree of self-awareness that children simply did not possess. Teaching it to a 7-year-old was like teaching calculus to a toddler, theoretically possible, practically insane. Snape did it anyway. "The mind is not a book," Snape said, sitting across from Harry in the sitting room, the curtains drawn, the fire low. "It cannot be read, but it can be penetrated by those who know how." The Dark Lord was the most accomplished legilimens who ever lived. If he returns, when he returns, he will attempt to access your mind. You must be able to stop him. How? By building walls. Not physical walls, mental ones. Barriers of thought and emotion, and will that prevent an intruder from accessing your memories? That depends on the builder. Some people imagine literal walls, stone, metal, wood. Others imagine water, or darkness, or light. The form is irrelevant. What matters is the substance. The wall must be built from something real, something that is truly yours, something that you care about so deeply that no one can take it from you. Like what? Snape looked at the child. At the scar on the forehead, which had faded to a thin silver line but was still visible, still present, still a reminder of the night everything changed. "Like love," he said. The word came out stiffly, reluctantly, as if it had been extracted from somewhere deep inside him against its will. "Love? Your mother's love saved your life. It is the most powerful protection you possess. Use it. When someone tries to enter your mind, think of her. Think of the protection she gave you. Let that be your wall." Harry concentrated, and Snape, who was a skilled legilimens himself, probed gently the lightest possible touch, a whisper against the surface of the child's mind. He found the wall. It was not perfect. It was not strong. It was a child's construction, built from the few memories Harry possessed, the photograph by his bed, the stories Snape, the feeling of being carried through the dark on the night everything changed, warm and safe in someone's arms. But it was there, and it held. "Good," Snape said, and meant it. By the time Harry was 10, he was the most unusually prepared child in the history of the wizarding world. He could brew 6 potions from memory. He could perform basic wandless magic, not the accidental kind, but controlled, deliberate manipulation of small objects. He could identify every plant in the Hogwarts herbology curriculum by sight, sound, and smell, because Snape had taken him foraging in the hills above Spinner's End since he was 4, and had drilled the properties of every magical plant into him with the relentless thoroughness of a man who believed that knowledge was the difference between life and death, and who had personal experience to back up this belief. He could read Latin. He could speak passable French. He had read every Defense Against the Dark Arts textbook through Year 5, and had practiced the theoretical components of shield charms, stunning spells, and disarming hexes with a wand that Snape had lent him, Snape's own school wand, kept in a drawer since graduation, which responded to Harry with a warmth that surprised them both. He knew about the wizarding world, about the Ministry and the Wizengamot and the International Statute of Secrecy, about the First War and Voldemort's rise, and about the Order of the Phoenix and the Death Eaters, and the terrible, complicated, morally ambiguous reality of a war in which good people did bad things, and bad people occasionally did good work. He knew, in broad strokes, about his parents, about Lily's brilliance and bravery and sacrifice, about James's courage and arrogance, and the complicated, sometimes cruel, sometimes generous person he had been. Snape had kept his promise. He had told Harry about James honestly, which meant he had told Harry about the bullying and the cruelty and systematic humiliation that James and his friends had inflicted on a boy who was poor and friendless and different. He had also told Harry about James's bravery, about his loyalty to his friends, about the fact that James Potter had died without a wand in his hand trying to buy his family time to escape. He was not a simple man, Snape said. He was not entirely good and he was not entirely bad. He was human, complex, contradictory, capable of great cruelty and great love in the same breath. You didn't like him, Harry said. I despised him. But you're telling me good things about him. Because the good things are true. Despising someone does not give you the right to erase the parts of them that are admirable. That is a form of dishonesty, and I have lied enough in my life. Harry considered this. Yes, why? Because I existed. Because I was different. Because I was Lily's friend before he was, and he could not bear the thought that someone else had reached her first. And because I gave him reasons. I was not innocent in our conflict. I was bitter and jealous, and I made choices that gave him ammunition. The cruelty was mutual. The blame was shared. That's very honest. I told you I would be. Most adults are cowards. I am many things, Harry, but I am not a coward. This was the first time Snape had called him Harry instead of the boy or Potter or child. Neither of them commented on it. But Harry noticed, and the noticing settled into him like warmth. He also knew about the scar. Not everything Snape had honoured his agreement with Dumbledore and had not studied the scar, but Harry knew that the scar was unusual, that it sometimes tingled, that it was connected, in ways not fully understood, to the dark wizard who had tried to kill him. It hurts sometimes, Harry told Snape one evening when he was 9. Not a lot, just a twinge, like someone's pressing on it. Snape's face went carefully blank. When does it hurt? At night, mostly, when I'm trying to sleep. Sometimes I have dreams. What kind of dreams? Dark ones. A room. A chair. Someone sitting in the chair. I can't see their face. Snape was very still. Tell me if the dreams change. Tell me immediately. Do not wait. Why? Because the scar is a connection. A link between you and the dark wizard who gave it to you. The dreams may be leakage fragments of his consciousness bleeding through the connection. If they intensify, it could mean he is growing stronger. I thought he was dead. I told you he was diminished. Not dead. Harry looked at the scar in the mirror above the fireplace. The thin, silver lightning bolt. A mark that he had carried his entire life, that he had assumed was simply part of him, like his green eyes or his dark hair. The idea that it was a connection to something outside himself, to something dark and dangerous, and not entirely destroyed, was unsettling in a way that he did not have words for. Harry asked. Yes, Snape said. He will come back, and when he does, you will be ready. How do you know I'll be ready? Because I am going to make sure of it. The Hogwarts letter arrived on July 31st, 1991, Harry's 11th birthday. Snape had, of course, known it was coming. He was a professor at the school. He had watched Harry's name appear on the enrolment list in September written in the same enchanted ink that had recorded every magical child born in Britain for the past 1,000 years. He had seen the letter being prepared, had watched the owl depart. But knowing and experiencing were different things. When Harry opened the letter and read it and looked up with those green eyes shining with excitement and something that was very close, Snape felt a complicated emotion that took him several days to identify. Pride. Not for himself. For Harry. For the boy who had grown up in a dark, cramped house on a grey street in a grey town, raised by a man who did not know how to express affection and who showed love through discipline and preparation and the relentless, exhausting, occasionally terrifying commitment to keeping one small human being alive and educated and ready for a world that would try to destroy him. Can we go to Diagon Alley? Harry asked. We will go tomorrow. Can we go now? It is 11 o'clock at night. The shops might be open. They are not. How do you know? Because I am an adult and I understand the concept of business hours. Harry grinned. The grin was pure lily-wide, infectious, impossible to resist. Snape did not grin back, but the corners of his mouth moved approximately 1 millimeter in an upward direction, which, for Snape, was the equivalent of a standing ovation. Diagon Alley was overwhelming, even for a child who had spent 10 years learning about magic. Harry had been raised with potions and plants and theory. He had brewed remedies and practiced wandless manipulation and read textbooks that most adults would find challenging. But he had done all of this in the sitting room of a small house on a small street, with the curtains drawn and the world kept at a safe distance. Diagon Alley was the world. Unfiltered, uncurtained, exploding with colour and noise and magic in its most exuberant, chaotic, magnificent form. Shops stacked on top of each other, owls in cages, cauldrons in towers, robes in every colour, wands in windows, people everywhere, wizards and witches of every description, talking and laughing and arguing and living in a way that Harry had read about but never experienced. He stood at the entrance to the alley and his mouth fell open. "Close your mouth," Snape said. "We are in public. It's amazing. It is a shopping district. It will be less amazing in 3 hours when your feet hurt and you are carrying 7. I want to see everything. You will see Madame Malkin's, Flourish and Blot's, the Apothecary, and Ollivander's. In that order. We are not browsing, we are acquiring supplies. Can we get ice cream?" We are not getting ice cream. They got ice cream. This was because Harry asked 3 times, and on the 3rd time said, "Mum would have let me have ice cream." And Snape, who had been blindsided by the use of the word mum in reference to Lily, by the casual, confident way Harry invoked a woman he had never known but loved anyway, was so disarmed that he agreed before his brain could overrule his heart. Harry got chocolate. Snape did not get anything. He stood beside the table at Fortescue's and watched Harry eat ice cream and felt again that complicated emotion, pride, and something else. Something warmer, something that he did not yet have a name for, because naming it would make it real, and making it real would make him vulnerable, and vulnerability was the one thing Severus Snape had spent his entire life trying to avoid. Ollivander's was last. The old man with the silvery eyes studied Harry for a long moment before presenting beechwood and dragon heartstring. 9 inches. Nothing. Maple and phoenix feather, 7 inches. A slight warmth, quickly fading. Try this one. Holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches. Nice and supple. The moment Harry's fingers closed around the holly wand, the shop exploded with light. Golden sparks erupted from the tip, illuminating the dusty shelves and the thousands of wand boxes with a warmth that felt like sunlight. Ollivander's eyebrows rose. "Curious," he said. "Very curious." Snape, standing by the door, went very still. "What is curious?" The phoenix whose tail feather resides in this wand gave another feather, just one other, and that other wand gave Mr. Potter his scar. The shop was... Harry held the wand. Snape stood at the door. Ollivander looked between them. "The wand chooses the wizard. Miss Snape, you know that better than most. I know many things, Miss Ollivander. Some of them I wish I did not." They left the shop. Harry held the holly wand the way you hold something precious carefully, reverently, aware of its weight and its meaning. Snape held the door open and said nothing, because the things he was thinking were too complicated, and because some conversations needed to wait until the ice cream had been eaten and the shopping had been done and the world had returned to its normal, manageable dimensions. They walked home in silence. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that exists between people who have spent 10 years in each other's company and who have learned that not every moment requires... At the door of Spinner's End, Harry stopped. Severus? He had never called Snape by his first name before, had never been told to, had always called him Sir, because Snape had never offered an alternative and Harry had never asked. Snape looked at him. "Thank you," Harry said, "for everything." Snape opened the door. "Inside, you have reading to do. I've read all the first-year books already. Repetition is the mother of mastery. Harry went inside. Snape stood on the doorstep for a moment, looking at the street, at the grey houses and the grey sky and the mill in the distance. Then he followed the boy into the house and closed the door behind him. The wand. The brother wand. The connection that ran from Harry to Voldemort to the Phoenix to the prophecy to the past, all of it tangled together in a knot that Snape could not untie and Dumbledore would not explain. He would deal with it tomorrow. Tonight, the boy had ice cream on his chin and a wand in his hand and a smile that looked exactly like Lily's. Tonight, that was enough. Platform 9 3/4 on September 1st, 1991 was the first time Harry had been surrounded by this many magical people. Snape brought him to King's Cross at 10:45. They walked through the barrier together, Snape first, then Harry pushing his trunk and emerged into the steam and noise of the platform. The Hogwarts Express was enormous, scarlet, gleaming, and Harry stared at it with the particular wonder of a child seeing something he has imagined for years and finding that reality exceeds imagination. "You will sit with other first years," Snape said. "You will be civil. You will not mention my name unless directly asked. If anyone inquires about your upbringing, you were raised by a private guardian. You will not lie, but you will not volunteer information." Why? Because the wizarding world knows your story. Or they think they do. They know you survived the killing curse. They know Voldemort was destroyed. They have spent 10 years turning you into a legend. They do not know that you were raised by a former Death Eater who teaches potions. This information, if revealed prematurely, will complicate your life considerably. It's going to come out eventually. Eventually is not today. Today you are a first-year student arriving at Hogwarts. Nothing more. Harry looked at the tall, thin, dark-haired man who had raised him for 10 years, who had taught him potions and Latin and occlumency, who had told him the truth about his parents and the war and the scar, who had shown love, not through warmth, but through preparation, through the relentless, exhausting, unglamorous work of making sure a child was ready for a world that wanted to destroy him. "I'll see you at the feast. You will see me in the potions classroom. At the feast, I am your professor, not your guardian. I know. Do not expect special treatment. I've never expected special treatment. You've never given me any." Something moved across Snape's face. Almost a smile. Not quite. "Get on the train," he said. Harry got on the train. He found a compartment near empty. He settled in, pulled out a book, Advanced Theory of Magical Defense, which was fifth-year material, but which Harry had been reading since he was 9, and waited. The door opened 5 minutes later. A boy with red hair and freckles, tall, gangly, with an open face and the particular energy of someone who has been running late their entire life. "Mind if I sit? Everywhere else is full." "Go ahead." The boy sat down, looked at Harry's book. His eyebrows rose. "That's not a first-year text." "No, how far ahead are you?" "Depends on the subject." "Blimey," the boy said. "Ron Weasley." "Harry Potter." Ron's jaw dropped. His eyes went to Harry's forehead, to the scar barely visible beneath his dark hair. "You're Harry Potter? The Harry Potter? I appear to be the only one." "Blimey," Ron said again. "My mum told me about you. Everyone knows about you. You're famous." "So I've been told. What's it like?" "Being famous? I wouldn't know. I grew up in a house with no mirrors and a man who didn't believe in compliments." Ron laughed. It was a good laugh, open, genuine, the laugh of someone who did not calculate the social value of laughter before deploying it. Harry liked him immediately. This was surprising, because Harry had not had much practice liking people. Snape was the only person he had spent significant time with, and liking Snape was an experience roughly equivalent to liking a porcupine, rewarding in theory, painful in practice, and requiring constant vigilance. "Who raised you?" Ron asked. "The prophet said you lived with muggles." I was raised by a private guardian. A wizard. Who? I'd rather not say yet. Ron accepted this with the easy unconcern of someone who had been raised in a large family and understood that everyone had things they didn't want to talk about. Want a chocolate frog? Harry took the frog. They talked. About Quidditch, which Harry knew theoretically and Ron knew obsessively. About Hogwarts, which Harry understood academically and Ron understood emotionally. About their families, which Harry navigated carefully and Ron described with the loving exasperation of someone who has 5 older brothers and a baby sister and parents who are wonderful but perpetually overwhelmed. A girl appeared in the doorway. Bushy brown hair, large front teeth, eyes that scanned the compartment with the rapid intensity of someone cataloguing everything. Has anyone seen a toad? A boy named Neville's lost one. No, Ron said. She looked at Harry's book. That's 5th year material. Yes, you've read it? Twice her eyes widened, then narrowed. The rapid succession suggested she was experiencing the unfamiliar and deeply uncomfortable sensation of encountering someone who might have read more than she had. I'm Hermione Granger, she said. And you are? Harry Potter. Goodness, I've read about you. In modern magical history, and the rise and fall of the dark arts, and great wizarding events of the 20th century, those books are approximately 40% accurate. How would you know? Because I was raised by someone who was there. Hermione opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, then sat down, uninvited, and said, Tell me everything. No, Harry said, and smiled because Hermione Granger reminded him of someone who was relentlessly, infuriatingly, magnificently brilliant, and who asked questions that other people were afraid to ask. She reminded him of Lily. Not in appearance, Hermione was brown-haired and brown-eyed and nothing like the photograph by Harry's bed, but in essence, in the quality of her intelligence, in the way she leaned forward when she was interested, the way her mind worked visibly behind her eyes. Harry looked at Hermione and thought, I'm going to drive you absolutely mad. The sorting hat descended over Harry's eyes and found a mind that was unlike anything it had encountered. Not because of the scar, not because of the prophecy, but because Harry's mind had been organised deliberately, carefully, expertly organised by someone who understood the architecture of thought and who had spent 7 years building structures inside this child's consciousness that were, by any measure, extraordinary. Well, the hat said. Someone has been preparing you. Harry said nothing. He had been trained in occlumency. The hat was an intrusion, and his instinct was to resist. Don't fight me, boy. I'm not an enemy. I'm a hat. And I've been doing this for 1,000 years. Harry relaxed. Marginally, interesting, very interesting. Courage, yes, quite a lot of it. Intelligent, ambition present, but controlled. Loyalty deep, but narrow. You love very few people, but the ones you love, you would die for. Where should I go? Harry asked. That is the question, isn't it? Slytherin would serve you well. The mind, the discipline, the strategic thinking, these are Slytherin qualities built by a Slytherin, trained in a Slytherin's house. You would thrive there. Gryffindor, because underneath the training, underneath the occlumency and the potions and the careful preparation, there is something else. Something that Severus Snape did not put there. Something that was there before he found you. Something that came from your mother. What is it? The willingness to stand in front of someone else and refuse to move. The willingness to die. That is not Slytherin, child. That is Gryffindor. Through and through. Harry thought of his mother. Of the photograph by his bed. Of a woman who had been given the choice between stepping aside and dying, and who had chosen to die. Gryffindor, Harry said. Gryffindor. The great hall erupted. The Gryffindor table exploded with cheers. The Weasley twins were banging the table. Hermione, already sorted, was applauding with both hands. At the staff table, Severus Snape sat perfectly still. His face was unreadable. His hands, beneath the table where no one could see them, were clenched so tightly that his nails had drawn blood from his palms. Not Slytherin. The boy had chosen Gryffindor. Had chosen his mother's house had chosen courage over cunning, bravery over ambition, the legacy of Lily Evans over the legacy of Severus Snape. It should have hurt. It did hurt. A small, sharp, precise pain, like a needle inserted between ribs. But underneath the pain, in a place that Snape would not acknowledge for several more years, there was something else. Pride. Because the boy had been given a choice, a real choice, the kind of choice that reveals character, and he had chosen the thing that was hardest. Not the house that would have been easy, that would have honoured his guardian, that would have placed him among people who thought the way Snape had taught him to think. He had chosen the house that would challenge him, the house that would demand courage instead of calculation, the house of Lily Evans. Snape unclenched his hands, placed and watched Harry Potter sit down at the Gryffindor table beside Ronald Weasley and begin, with a grin that was pure Lily, to eat. Potions class was the first real test. The first year Gryffindors filed into the dungeon classroom on Monday morning and found Professor Snape already at the front, standing behind his desk with the particular stillness of a man who has spent years perfecting the art of intimidation through silence. Harry took a seat in the second row. Ron sat beside him. Hermione sat in front of them, her quill already out, her parchment already labelled with the date and the subject and her name in handwriting so precise it looked typeset. Snape began the class the way he always began the class, with fear. There will be no foolish wand-waving or silly incantations in this class, he said, and his voice was quiet and cold and carried to every corner. As such, I don't expect many of you to appreciate the subtle science and exact art that is potion making. However, for those select few who possess the predisposition, I can teach you how to bewitch the mind and ensnare the senses. I can tell you how to bottle fame, brew glory, and even put a stopper in death. He paused. His eyes swept the room, landed on Harry. Potter, what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? The room held its breath. This was the test, the moment everyone was waiting for. The boy who lived, facing the most feared teacher in the school. The draught of living death, sir, Harry said, a powerful sleeping potion. The addition of asphodel must be precisely timed 13 minutes after the wormwood reaches a simmer, or the potion becomes unstable. Silence, and the key to achieving the correct counterclockwise stirring for the first 7 turns, followed by a single clockwise turn. Most brewers stir too fast. The motion should be slow, deliberate, more silence. The kind of silence that occurs when an entire room of people simultaneously realizes that something unexpected is happening. Where would you look if I told you to find me a bezoar? In the stomach of a goat. Although the efficacy varies by breed, the bezoars of Alpine goats are 20% more potent than those of lowland varieties due to the mineral content of their diet. Snape stared at Harry. Harry stared back. Green eyes met black. Acceptable, Snape said. He turned to the blackboard, began writing instructions. The class exhaled. Ron leaned toward Harry. How did you know all that? I was raised by someone who cares very much about potions. Who? Harry looked at the man at the front of the classroom. The tall, dark-haired, black-robed man who was writing with his left hand and watching the class with his right eye, and who had spent 10 years teaching a small boy everything he knew about potions and life and the terrible, beautiful, complicated business of being human. I'll tell you later, Harry said. The truth came out in October. It was inevitable. Hogwarts was a school, and schools were gossip factories, and the question of how Harry Potter knew everything he knew and nothing he didn't was a puzzle that the student body was determined to solve. Hermione had already suspected. She had watched Harry in classes, watched the way he handled questions in potions with a familiarity that went beyond textbook knowledge, watched the way Snape's gaze lingered on Harry in a way that was not hostile, but was not quite professional either. "He taught you," Hermione said in the library 3 weeks into term. "Professor Snape. He's the one who raised you." Harry looked at her. "How did you figure it out?" "The way you stir. Counterclockwise, then clockwise. That's Snape's method. It's not in any textbook. He developed it himself. You do it instinctively, which means you've been doing it since before you could read. That's remarkably observant. I'm remarkably observant." Ron took it differently. Ron, who had spent 3 weeks hating Snape with the cheerful, uncomplicated contempt of a boy who had been told by 5 older brothers that Snape was the worst teacher in the school. "Snape? You were raised by Snape? The Snape? The man who took 20 points from Gryffindor because Neville sneezed too loudly?" He didn't take points because Neville sneezed. He took points because Neville's sneeze knocked a vial of shrinking solution into a cauldron of swelling solution, which created a chemical reaction that nearly took out the east wall of the dungeon. "You're defending him. I'm providing context. You're defending Snape. He's my guardian, Ron." Ron stared, processed, the gears turning behind his freckled face with the visible effort of a boy recalibrating his entire understanding of the world. "Is he? Nice? At home? He is never nice. He is rigorous, demanding, precise, occasionally cutting, frequently sarcastic, and relentlessly committed to my education and survival." That doesn't sound nice. It isn't nice. It's better than nice. Nice is temporary. Commitment is permanent. That's the most Snape thing I've ever heard come out of someone who isn't Snape. Thank you. It wasn't a compliment. I know. I'm choosing to receive it as one. Ron looked at Harry for a long moment, then shrugged with the particular grace of a Weasley accepting something incomprehensible and moving on. "Right, so Snape's your dad. That's mental. Want to play chess? He's not my dad. He's my guardian." Same thing. It is emphatically not the same thing. It is. You just haven't figured it out yet. Ron was right. But it would take Harry several more years to understand that, and when he did, the understanding would arrive not with a dramatic revelation, but with a quiet certainty, the way all important truths arrive slowly, gently, through the accumulated evidence of 1,000 small moments. The answer arrived more publicly via Draco Malfoy. "My father says you were raised by Snape," Draco said, in the corridor outside Defense Against the Dark Arts, loud enough for everyone to hear. "My father says you live in Snape's house, in that muggle dump in Manchester." The corridor went silent. Harry looked at Draco. At the pale, pointed face, the white blonde hair, the superior expression that was, Harry recognized, a mask. The same kind of mask that Snape wore. The mask of someone who has been taught that showing vulnerability is the same as showing weakness. "Your father is correct," Harry said. The silence deepened. "Professor Snape has been my guardian since I was 15 months old. He took me in the night my parents were killed. He raised me. And yes, his house is in Cokeworth, not Manchester, which suggests that your father's intelligence network is somewhat less impressive than he believes." Draco's face went red. The students in the corridor were staring. Ron's mouth was open. Hermione's eyes were wide. "Snape is a Death Eater," Draco said. "Snape is a lot of things," Harry said. "A Death Eater is only one of them. And not the most." He walked away. The corridor erupted in whispers that would, within the hour, reach every corner of the castle, and within the day reach the offices of the Daily Prophet, and within the week produce a headline that Snape would read over breakfast and set down with a sigh that contained 17 years of accumulated exhaustion. The boy who lived, raised by Death Eater Professor, that is not accurate, Snape said, to the bowl of porridge in front of him. Harry, sitting across the table in Snape's private quarters where they still shared meals twice a week, said, "Which part?" "The Death Eater part is reductive. The Professor part is technically correct. The raised by part implies affection, which the Prophet has no evidence for. Is there affection?" Snape looked at him. Those green eyes, Lily's eyes, in a face that was, at 11, beginning to look disturbingly like James. "There is commitment," Snape said. "Commitment is more reliable than affection." "That's not an answer. It is the answer I am prepared to give." Harry ate his toast. Snape drank his tea. The Prophet lay between them on the table, the headline staring up at them. "The other students will treat you differently now. They already treated me differently. I'm Harry Potter. Everything about me is different. This is a new kind of different. Being famous is glamorous. Being raised by me is controversial. Expect questions, expect hostility, expect people to doubt your loyalties. My loyalties are not in question. To you, no. To others, everything is in question. The son of 2 Gryffindor heroes, raised by a Slytherin Death Eater. The narrative writes itself. Then we'll rewrite it." Snape looked at the boy, at the determination in his face, the set of his jaw, the quiet, unshakable confidence that came not from arrogance but from preparation, from 10 years of being told the truth, even when the truth was ugly, from being taught that the world was complicated and that the appropriate response to complexity was not simplification but engagement. "Yes," Snape said, "we will." The rest of first year unfolded with the particular chaos that attended Harry Potter's existence the way weather attended the ocean. The Philosopher's Stone, the 3-headed dog, the trapdoor, the mirror. Harry navigated it differently than he might have without Snape's training. The Devil's Snare he recognized from herbology lessons conducted in the hills above Cokeworth. The potions puzzle he solved in under a minute, because the logic was simple if you understood potion chemistry, and Harry understood potion chemistry better than most adults. The Mirror of Erised was the challenge not because the puzzle was difficult, but because what Harry saw in the mirror was devastating. He saw his mother, and his father, and standing slightly behind them, awkward and uncomfortable, and clearly wishing he were somewhere else, Severus Snape. A family. The family that had never existed and never could exist. The impossible, beautiful, heartbreaking configuration of the 3 people who had shaped Harry's life, 2 through their deaths, and 1 through his stubborn, complicated, insufficient, extraordinary love. Harry looked at the mirror and felt something crack inside him. Not break. Crack a hairline fracture in the careful, disciplined, occlumency-reinforced architecture of his emotional control. He dealt with Quirrell. He dealt with Voldemort. He woke up in the hospital wing with Snape sitting beside his bed, reading the Prophet, pretending not to have been there for the past 6 hours. "You nearly died," Snape said, without looking up from the paper. "Yes, that was reckless. Yes, you should have come to me. You would have stopped me. That is the point of coming to me. Quirrell was going to steal the stone. Voldemort was going to return. I couldn't wait." Snape put down the paper, looked at Harry, and for the first time in Harry's memory, the mask slipped. Not completely. Not the full, unguarded Snape that existed somewhere beneath the black robes and the cutting remarks and the 16 years of performed indifference. But a crack. An opening. Enough for Harry to see what was underneath. Fear. The fear of a man who had already lost the person he loved most, and who had spent 10 years trying to make sure he did not lose the next one. "Do not do that again," Snape said. "I can't promise that. I am not asking for a promise. I am issuing an instruction. Instructions can be disobeyed. Not mine, not by you, Harry looked at his guardian, at the man who had raised him in a dark house on a grey street, who had taught him potions and occlumency and the complicated truth about his parents, who had loved his mother and hated his father, and felt something for Harry himself that was neither love nor hate, but a third thing, a new thing, a thing that had no name because no one had ever been in this exact position. "I'll try," Harry said. "You will succeed. I'll try to succeed." Snape picked up the paper, resumed reading, but his hands, Harry noticed, were not entirely steady. Second year brought the Chamber of Secrets, and the first time Harry understood what Snape had been trying to tell him about the world. The attacks began in October. Petrified students, messages on the walls, the school in a slow, creeping panic that grew worse with each attack, each whisper, each terrified glance in the corridors. Harry could speak to snakes. This had been discovered during the dueling club, when a conjured serpent had slithered toward Justin Finch Fletchley, and Harry had spoken to it without thinking. The words coming out in a hiss that was, to his ears, perfectly normal English, and to everyone else's ears, the language of dark wizards. The school turned on him. Not all of it. Ron and Hermione stood firm. Neville stood firm. The Weasley twins deployed aggressive humour as a defensive weapon, but enough of it. Enough whispers. Enough turned backs. Enough of the particular cruelty that comes from people who are afraid and who channel their fear into hatred of whoever is most convenient. "They think I'm the heir of Slytherin," Harry told Snape in the potions office during one of their twice-weekly meetings. "I know. I'm not. I know that as well." "Then why aren't you telling them?" Snape sat down, looked at Harry with an expression that was not unsympathetic, but was not comforting either. The expression of a man delivering a lesson that the student does not want to learn. "Because this is important," Snape said. "This is what the world does. This is what I have been preparing you for. The wizarding world loves you when you are useful and fears you when you are different. You are the boy who lived, as long as you play the role they have written for you. The moment you deviate, the moment you reveal an ability that makes them uncomfortable, they turn. They will always." That's cynical. It is realistic. I have lived it. I was a poor, friendless, half-blood boy who was good at dark arts and bad at making friends, and the world decided what I was before I had a chance to decide for myself. You are experiencing the same thing. The only difference is that you have the tools to survive it. Tools you gave me, tools you earned. I gave you the training. You built the person. The chamber opened. Ginny Weasley was taken. Harry went down. He took Snape's advice before going, left a note in the potions office, detailed, precise, listing everything he knew about the chamber and the diary and the probable identity of the monster. Then he went anyway, because the note was insurance and the going was instinct, and Harry had been raised by a man who understood that sometimes you had to act despite the plan, not because of it. The basilisk. Tom Riddle. The diary. The sword of Gryffindor. Harry killed the basilisk and destroyed the diary and nearly died from the venom, and was saved and stumbled back to the surface covered in blood and snake guts, and the particular expression of someone who has just fought a 60-foot serpent in a secret chamber and is starting to suspect that his life is going to continue being like this. Snape was waiting at the entrance to Myrtle's bathroom. He had received the note, had come immediately, had been standing there for 40 minutes. His face the colour of old parchment, his wand in his hand, trying to figure out how to get through a sealed entrance that only opened to Parseltongue. Harry came through the pipe, landed on the bathroom floor, looked up and saw Snape standing over him. "You left a note," Snape said. "You told me to communicate. I told you not to leave a note and then throw yourself into a pit. The situations required different approaches. The The situation required you to not nearly die. I didn't nearly die. I exactly almost died. Snape looked at the boy, at the blood and the venom stains and the sword and the destroyed diary and the green eyes, Lily's eyes, shining with adrenaline and defiance and the particular manic energy that comes from surviving something that should have killed you. You are going to be the death of me, Snape said. I hope not. You're the only parent I have. The word hit Snape like a physical blow. Parent, not professor. Parent? He did not respond. He took Harry to the hospital wing and stood by the bed until the boy fell asleep, and then he walked to his office and sat at his desk and stared at the wall for a very long time. Parent? Third year brought Sirius Black, and the truth that Snape had been dreading. The escaped convict. The alleged betrayer. The man the wizarding world believed had sold Lily and James to Voldemort. Except that Snape knew the truth, had always known, or at least suspected. Because Snape understood the dynamics of the Marauders better than anyone he had been their victim, their target, the person against whom their cruelty was most consistently and enthusiastically deployed, and he knew that Sirius Black was too obvious. Too performatively loyal to be the real traitor. The real traitor would be someone quieter, someone overlooked, someone like Peter Pettigrew. He had not shared this suspicion with Dumbledore, had not shared it with anyone. Because the suspicion was mixed with other things, with hatred, with old grievances, with the kind of complicated, poisonous personal history that makes objective assessment impossible. Now Sirius Black was free and heading for Hogwarts, and the Dementors were stationed around the school, and Harry was having nightmares about his mother's death, the scar flaring, the connection to Voldemort leaking memories through the barrier of his occlumency. The Dementors make it worse, Harry told Snape during a Wednesday meeting. The scar. The dreams. When the Dementors are near, I hear her. Screaming? Snape's face did not change, but something behind it shifted. A tectonic movement. Deep, slow, devastating. I will teach you the Patronus charm, Snape said. You can produce a Patronus? Yes, what form does it take? Snape raised his wand. Expecto Patronum. The dough materialized in the office. Silver, luminous, graceful, it moved through the space with a quiet beauty that seemed completely incompatible with the man who had produced it. It stopped beside Harry, turned its head, looked at him with silver eyes. Harry stared. It's a dough. Yes, that was my mother's Patronus. Yes, yours matches hers. Yes, Harry looked at Snape. Past the mask and the black robes and the cutting remarks and the 16 years of performed indifference, looked at the man underneath, and saw for the first time the full scope of what Severus Snape felt for Lily Evans. Not the grief, which he had always known about. Not the guilt, which was as visible as the nose on Snape's face. The vast, permanent, all-consuming love that had survived Lily's death and James's rivalry and Snape's own terrible choices and a decade of raising a child who was a daily reminder of everything he had lost. You loved her, Harry said. Always the dough faded. The office was quiet. Teach me, Harry said. Snape taught him. Not easily the Patronus was advanced magic, and Harry was 13, and the memories required to power the charm were complicated by trauma and grief, and the specific emotional landscape of a boy raised by a man who expressed love through discipline rather than warmth. But Harry's Patronus emerged on the 5th lesson. A stag. James's form. Prongs. Snape looked at the stag and felt the needle between the ribs again. James's animal. The eternal, inescapable presence of the man he hated manifested in the magic of the boy he loved. Because he did love Harry. He knew it now. had probably known it for years, but knowing and acknowledging were different things, and Snape was a man for whom acknowledgement was the hardest form of honesty. He loved Harry. Not the way he loved Lily, nothing would ever match that, nothing could. The first love was a wound that would never heal. But he loved Harry in a different way. In the way that you love someone you have built. Someone you have taught and protected and argued with and worried about and watched grow from a crying baby in a crib to a brave, infuriating young man who produced a stag Patronus and grinned like his mother. He did not say this. Snape did not say things like this. But the doe and the stag existed in the same office, silver and luminous, and the space between them was not empty. The Shrieking Shack, Sirius Black, Peter Pettigrew, Remus Lupin. Harry learnt the truth about the night his parents died. The real truth, not the version the Ministry had constructed. Pettigrew was the traitor. Sirius was innocent. Everything the world believed was wrong, and Snape arrived in the middle of it, one drawn, face white with rage, because Sirius Black was in the same room as Harry, and 12 years of hatred and guilt and the memory of every cruel thing the Marauders had ever done was crashing through his mind like a tidal wave. "Step away from the boy, Black. Severus," I said. "Listen to me. I have spent 12 years listening to the world tell me that you betrayed them, that you sold Lily to the Dark Lord. And I believed it, because I wanted to believe it, because hating you was easier than examining the possibility that the world was wrong and I was complicit in an innocent man's suffering." The room went very quiet. "But the boy is mine," Snape said. "He is mine in every way. I raised him. I taught him. I held him when he was sick, and I answered his questions about his mother, and I sat beside his bed when the nightmares came. You abandoned him. You went to prison instead of coming for him. I understand why. I understand you had no choice. But I was there. I was there when you were not. And I will not allow anyone, not you, not Lupin, not Dumbledore, to..." Sirius stared at Snape, at the man he had tormented for 7 years at Hogwarts, at the man who had, in the years since, done the things Sirius could not do. Raised the son of his best friends. "I don't want to take him," Sirius said. "I want to know him. Then you will do so on my terms. Since when do you get to..." "Since the night I walked into a destroyed house and picked up a baby and carried him home and spent 10 years keeping him alive. That is when I get to set terms." Harry stood between them, between the man who raised him and the man who should have, between the guardian and the godfather, between the present and the past. "I'd like to know you," Harry said to Sirius. "Both of you. I'd like to know what my parents were really like, from all perspectives." Sirius looked at Harry, at the green eyes, Lily's eyes, and something in his gaunt, haunted face softened. "You look just like James," Sirius said, "except the eyes." "He has his mother's eyes," Snape said. Quietly, as if the words had been extracted from somewhere very deep, and for one moment, in the Shrieking Shack with a werewolf and a traitor and a wrongly convicted man and a boy who was the living intersection of everyone's grief for one moment, Sirius Black and Severus Snape looked at each other and understood something that neither of them would ever articulate. They had both loved Lily, and they both loved Harry, and those two facts, placed side by side, created a foundation that might, given time and effort, support something that was not friendship, but was perhaps its distant cousin. Coexistence, built on the shared project of keeping one small human being alive. 4th year, the Triwizard Tournament, Voldemort's return, Harry's name. Snape knew immediately that it was a trap. The goblet was a powerful magical artifact, but its security was not infallible, and the fact that Harry's name had emerged as a 4th champion suggested interference at a level that only a skilled dark wizard could achieve. "Do not compete," Snape told Harry. In the potions office, the night Harry's name was drawn. I don't have a choice. It's a binding magical contract. Then, compete to survive. Not to win. Survival is the objective. Everything else is secondary. You sound like you're giving me tactical instructions. I am. This is not a school competition, Harry. Someone has entered you into this tournament to put you in danger. Do not let them succeed. Harry survived the dragon, survived the lake, survived the maze. He did not survive the graveyard unscathed. The portkey, the cemetery, Pettigrew, the cauldron, Voldemort, rising from the dark water, reborn, terrible, the red eyes and the flat face and the voice that Harry had heard in nightmares for 13 years. Harry Potter. The boy who lived, come to die. Harry did not die. Harry fought. He fought with everything Snape had taught him: the occlumency, the shield charms, the defensive techniques, the discipline and control that 10 years of preparation had built. He fought with the Priori Incantatem, the ghostly figures emerging from the connected wands: Cedric, an old man, a woman, and then James. Lily looked at him from the golden light and said, "Let go." And Harry let go, and ran and grabbed the portkey and crashed back onto the Hogwarts lawn with Cedric's body, and a story that the Ministry would spend a year trying to deny. Snape was there, on the lawn. He had felt it through the dark mark, the burning that came when Voldemort summoned his followers, and had pushing through the crowd, ignoring Dumbledore and Fudge and the screaming spectators, reaching Harry's side. "Look at me," Snape said. Harry looked. Green eyes, swimming with tears and shock and the terrible knowledge of what he had seen. "He's back," Harry said. "Voldemort, he's back." "I know," Snape said. And there was something in his voice, not fear. Exactly. Resignation. The resignation of a man who has spent 14 years waiting for the worst to happen and who has been vindicated in the most terrible way possible. "What do we do?" Harry asked. "We do what we have always done. We prepare. We fight. We survive." Together? Snape looked at the boy, at the blood and the tears and the trembling hands, at the green eyes that were, in this moment, not Lily's eyes, but Harry's eyes, entirely, unmistakably Harry's. "Together," he said. The years that followed were the hardest of their lives. 5th year brought Dolores Umbridge, and with her the particular horror of institutional cruelty disguised as order. Snape despised Umbridge. This was notable because Snape despised many people, but his contempt for Umbridge had a quality that was different from his usual disdain. It was personal. Because Umbridge was the thing that Snape had spent his career pretending to be cold or indifferent to student suffering, but where Snape's cruelty was performance, a mask worn to maintain cover, Umbridge's was genuine. She enjoyed it. She enjoyed the power, the control, the particular pleasure of making children afraid. When Harry showed Snape the scars on his hand, the words carved in his own blood by Umbridge's quill, Snape went very still. She did this. Yes, how many times? 5. Snape took Harry's hand, turned it over, examined the scars with the clinical eye of a man who had spent 20 years around dark objects and could identify the magical signature of a cursed implement the way a sommelier identifies wine. "This is a blood quill," Snape said. "They are classified as dark objects. Their use on students is prohibited by 7 different ministry regulations." "She doesn't seem to care about regulations." "No, she does not." Snape released Harry's hand. His face was the mask, cold, controlled, unreadable, but his eyes were not. His eyes were something else entirely. "I will deal with this," Snape said. "How?" "Through channels that do not require me to hex a ministry official, although the temptation is considerable." Snape. Not angry letters. Snape did not write angry letters, because anger in writing is evidence, and evidence is a weapon that can be turned against you. He wrote precise, measured, legally devastating letters to the Board of Governors, to the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, to specific members of the Wizengamot who owed favours to specific people who owed favours. Each letter documented Umbridge's violations with the thoroughness of a man who had spent decades building intelligence dossiers. The letters did not remove Umbridge, not immediately, but they created a paper trail that would, eventually, contribute to her downfall. In the meantime, Snape taught Harry advanced defensive magic in evening sessions that were technically tutoring and were actually combat training. "The Dark Lord will return," Snape said in the room, which he had appropriated for their sessions with a combination of professional authority and pointed comments about the room's previous uses. "When he does, you will face Death Eaters who have been practicing dark arts since before you were born. You must be better than them. Not more powerful, more prepared. Hermione and Ron want to learn too. Bring them. Bring anyone who is willing to fight. You want me to form a student defense group? I want you to form a resistance cell. The distinction matters." This was how Dumbledore's army began, not as a student rebellion against Umbridge, although it became that, but as a project initiated by Severus Snape, who understood better than anyone that the war was coming and that the children of Hogwarts would be on the front lines. Harry taught. Snape supervised, in secret, providing lesson plans and tactical advice and the particular kind of encouragement that consisted entirely of pointing out what Harry was doing wrong and never mentioning what he was doing right. "Your shield charm is adequate," Snape said after watching Harry demonstrate for the Dar. "Your stunning spell your Patronus is excellent, but you produce it too slowly in combat situations. Speed is survival. You could say good job. I could. I choose not to. Good job is what you tell a child who has drawn a picture for the refrigerator. You are training soldiers. Accuracy is more useful than encouragement. Both would be nice. Both is a luxury. We do not have luxuries. The Department of Mysteries. The trap. The battle. Harry went because Voldemort had shown him a vision of Sirius being tortured. And Harry, despite 14 years of occlumency training, despite Snape's explicit instruction to verify visions before acting on them, went. Because Sirius was family. Because love makes you stupid. Because the thing that made Harry a hero, the willingness to run toward danger for the people he loved, was the same thing that made him vulnerable. Sirius fell through the veil. And Harry, who had spent 3 years building a relationship with his godfather, 3 years learning about his parents from someone who had loved them unreservedly, watched Sirius disappear and felt the loss like a physical wound. Snape found him afterward, in the atrium of the Ministry, sitting on the floor, staring at nothing. "He's gone," Harry said. "Yes, I should have checked. You told me to always verify. You told me Voldemort would use the connection against me. Yes, it's my fault." Snape sat down beside him, on the floor of the Ministry of Magic, in his black robes, looking approximately as comfortable as a cat in a bathtub. But he sat. "It is the Dark Lord's fault," Snape said. "He set the trap. He created the vision. He exploited the love you feel for Sirius, because love is your greatest strength and your greatest vulnerability, and the Dark Lord has always been skilled at turning strengths into weaknesses. I should have been stronger. You are 15. You are not supposed to be strong enough to resist Voldemort's manipulations. That is my job, and I failed it tonight as surely as you did." Harry looked at him. "You failed? I should have been watching. I should have recognized the signs. I should have been in the room when the vision came instead of in my office grading papers like a fool while the Dark Lord was dismantling my student's mind." "You're not a fool. Tonight I was." And Sirius Black paid for it. They sat on the floor of the Ministry and shared the guilt. Because guilt, like grief, is lighter when carried by two. Fifth year also brought the full prophecy neither can live while the other survives, and the understanding that Harry's destiny was not a metaphor. "I have to kill him," Harry said in Snape's office at midnight, his voice flat. "Or he kills you. Those are the only options?" Those are the options the prophecy describes. Whether the prophecy is absolute or merely probabilistic is a question that Dumbledore and I have debated for 14 years without resolution. And what do you believe? Snape was quiet for a long time. I believe that prophecies describe tendencies, not certainties. I believe that the future is not fixed. I believe that choice matters, that the choices we make in response to prophecy are more powerful than the prophecy itself. That sounds hopeful. It sounds like something your mother would have said. Harry looked at the photograph. He still carried the one from Snape's book, the one of Lily laughing. He had added others over the years. One of James, obtained from Sirius. One of Snape himself, taken by Harry on a Tuesday morning when Snape was not paying attention, showing the man at his desk grading papers with an expression of concentrated irritation. "If I die," Harry said, "if the prophecy you will not die. But if you will not die. I did not spend 14 years keeping you alive to lose you now. You will not die, Harry. I forbid it. You can't forbid death. Watch me." 6th year brought the Horcruxes and the truth about the scar. Dumbledore told Harry. In the headmaster's office, with the pensieve and the memories and the terrible, devastating, mathematically precise explanation of what Voldemort had done. 7 pieces of soul. 6 Horcruxes. The diary, the ring, the locket, the cup, the diadem, and the 7th. The one that was not intentional, the one that was created on the night of October 31st, 1981, when the killing curse rebounded and a fragment of Voldemort's soul lodged in the only living thing in the room. Harry. Harry was a Horcrux. He walked from Dumbledore's office to the dungeons. It was 3 a.m. The castle was silent. His footsteps echoed on the stone. He knocked on the door of Snape's private quarters. Snape opened the door in a black dressing gown, saw Harry's face, stepped aside. Harry walked in, sat down in the chair that had always been his chair, the one by the fire, the one where he had sat since he was 11 years old for twice weekly meetings that were ostensibly about academic progress, but were actually about the only relationship that either of them had ever sustained. "He told you," Snape said. "You knew." "I suspected. I suspected from the moment I saw the scar, from the moment it resisted healing, from the moment the connection to the Dark Lord became clear. You suspected I was a Horcrux. I suspected you carried a fragment of his soul. Yes, for how long? Since you were 2. 14 years. You suspected for 14 years and you didn't tell me. Dumbledore forbade it. Since when do you obey Dumbledore? Since the night he gave me the only thing I had left to live for." Silence. The fire crackled. The room was warm, the way Snape's rooms were always warm, because Snape had spent 11 years in a cold house and had resolved when he moved to Hogwarts that he would never be cold again. "What does it mean?" Harry asked. "It means that the fragment of the Dark Lord's soul that resides in your scar must be destroyed for the Dark Lord to be killed. And the only way to destroy a Horcrux that is embedded in a living host is to kill the host. Dumbledore believes there may be another way. Do you?" Snape looked at the fire, at the flames that moved and changed and consumed and were never the same twice. "I believe your mother's protection may provide an alternative. The sacrifice she made, the love-based magic, is embedded in your blood, your skin, your very being. It is possible that this protection, which has already saved your life once, could shield you from the destruction of the Horcrux. That the fragment could be destroyed without destroying you. Possible, not certain. Nothing in magic is certain. But I have spent 14 years studying this. I have read everything. I have consulted sources that Dumbledore does not know I possess. And I choose to believe that there is a way through this that does not end with your death. And if you're wrong, then I am wrong. And I will have failed the only promise I ever made." Harry looked at his guardian. at the man who had raised him in grief and guilt and the complicated, insufficient, extraordinary love of a person who does not know how to love and does it anyway. "You haven't failed," Harry said. "You've never failed. Not once. I have failed many times. Not at this. Not at me." Snape's hands, resting on his knees, were trembling. He clasped them together. "We will find a way," Snape said. "Together? Together, the Astronomy Tower. The night that changed everything. Snape killed Dumbledore. This was the plan. Had always been the plan. Dumbledore was dying, the curse from the ring was spreading, and the man had months, not years, and the plan required Snape to maintain his cover, to remain in Voldemort's inner circle, to be the spy but Harry did not know the plan. Harry was in the tower. Harry watched Snape raise his wand and cast the curse and watched Dumbledore fall and felt the world crack open. No. Snape did not look back. Could not look back. Because looking back meant seeing Harry's face, and seeing Harry's face meant the mask would slip. And if the mask slipped in front of the Death Eaters, in front of Draco and Bellatrix, everything was lost. The cover, the intelligence, the war. He ran through the castle, through the grounds, Harry chasing him, screaming, casting hexes that Snape deflected without returning fire. "Fight back!" Harry screamed. "Fight me, you coward!" Snape stopped. Turned. His face was a mask of ice and fury and something else, something that Harry in his rage could not see. "Do not," Snape said, "call me a coward." Then he was gone, into the night, through the gates, into the darkness. And Harry stood on the grounds of Hogwarts and felt the architecture of his world collapse. The man who raised him, the man who taught him, the man who loved his mother and protected her son and held him when the nightmares came, that man had just killed the headmaster and fled. The betrayal was total, absolute, the worst kind, the kind from someone you trust, someone you love. Harry knelt on the grass and pressed his hands against his face and screamed into the dark. The year that followed was the year Harry learned what it meant to be truly alone. He was not alone. He had Ron and Hermione who stood beside him with the stubborn loyalty that had been the defining characteristic of their friendship since the Troll in first year. He had the Order. He had allies and resources and a mission, the Horcruxes, the fragments of Voldemort's soul that had to be destroyed before the Dark Lord could die. And the absence of Snape was different from any other absence Harry had ever experienced. It was not like losing Sirius, which had been a sharp, sudden amputation. It was like losing gravity. The fundamental force that had oriented Harry's life, the voice in his head that said, "Think before you act and prepare for every contingency and do not eat porridge on Tuesdays if you don't want to," was gone. Worth turned, Snape was the enemy now. The man who had murdered Dumbledore. The Death Eater who had been a Death Eater all along, according to everyone who had always suspected it. "He betrayed us," Ron said, early in the Horcrux hunt, in a tent in the Forest of Dean, rain drumming on the canvas. "He was always a Death Eater. He played us all." "Maybe," Harry said. "Maybe? He killed Dumbledore. I know what he did." "Then why are you defending him?" "I'm not defending him. I'm saying I don't understand. And I was raised by the man, Ron, 14 years. I knew him better than anyone. And the person I knew was not someone who would betray Dumbledore." People surprise you. Snape didn't surprise me. Not once. In 14 years. He was the most consistent person I ever met. Consistent in his grief, his guilt, his commitment. That kind of consistency doesn't suddenly reverse. Something else is happening. Something I don't understand yet. Or you can't accept that the person who raised you was evil. At his best friend, whose loyalty was absolute, but whose understanding of Snape was limited to 7 years of classroom antagonism. He wasn't evil, Ron. He was complicated. And complicated people do things that look evil to people who only see one side. That sounds like something Snape would say. It is something Snape would say. He said it to me when I was 10 about my father. People are not simply good. Everyone is both, in different proportions. I've spent my whole life trying to understand what that means. And I think it means that the truth is usually worse and better than what you expect. And I think the truth about Snape is the same. The truth arrived, as noted, in a pensieve, in the shrieking shack, in the memories of a dying man. But before the pensieve, before the battle, there was one March, Malfoy Manor. The Snatchers had captured Harry, Ron, and Hermione, dragged them to the house. Bellatrix was there, Lucius, Narcissa, the Dark Lord's most loyal followers, and Snape. He was in the drawing room when they were brought in, standing by the fireplace, black robes. The mask, not the Death Eater mask, his own mask, the one he had worn for 20 years, the impenetrable, ice-cold expression of a man who has no feelings about anything. Harry's face was swollen from a stinging hex, distorted, barely recognizable. But the eyes were green. Lily's eyes. Harry's eyes. Snape looked at Harry, and Harry looked at Snape, and the room was full of Death Eaters, and the world was falling apart, and neither of them said a word. But something passed. Not communication, exactly, not a message. A recognition. The kind of recognition that exists between two people who have spent 14 years in each other's company and who can read each other's silence the way other people read. I know, Harry thought. I know you don't understand. The silence said back. I'm trying. Keep trying. Don't stop. Draco was asked to identify Harry. Draco hesitated. And in that hesitation, Snape did something so subtle that only Harry noticed. A slight shift in weight, a minute adjustment of his wand hand, the tiniest possible preparation to intervene. He did not need to. Dobby came. The escape happened, but the preparation was there. The readiness. The commitment, still present, still active, still operating beneath the surface of the performance. Harry escaped Malfoy Manor with a new certainty that he could not articulate and would not be able to verify until the pensieve. But the certainty was there, lodged in his chest like a coal, burning quietly. Snape was still his. Snape had never stopped. Whatever had happened on the astronomy tower, whatever the world believed, whatever the evidence suggested, Snape was his, and he was Snape's, and the bond between them was not something that could be broken by a killing curse, or a flight into darkness, or a year of silence. It could only be confirmed by truth, by memories, by the word that Snape had used 20 years ago in Dumbledore, and that he meant now more than ever. Always the truth came in a pensieve, Snape's memories. Given to Harry in the shrieking shack on the night of the Battle of Hogwarts as Snape lay dying from Nagini's venom, his blood pooling on the dusty floor, his life pouring out through wounds that no spell could close. Take them, Snape whispered. Take them and understand. Harry's silver threads pulled from a dying man's mind, and in Dumbledore's office, in the pensieve, he lived them. He saw Snape as a boy, 9 years old, thin, dark-haired, dressed in clothes that were too big and too old, standing beneath a tree, watching a girl with red hair perform magic she did not yet understand. You're a witch, and the girl turned, and her eyes were green, and Snape's life changed forever. He saw Hogwarts. The sorting, the years of friendship and its slow, terrible dissolution, the word, the one Snape had used in a moment of pain and rage, the word that had ended everything between them. He saw the prophecy, saw Snape deliver it to the Dark Lord, saw the realization dawn, saw Snape go to Dumbledore, broken, desperate, offering everything. Hide them all, keep her safe, and what will you give me in return? Anything. He saw the night at Godric's Hollow, saw Snape holding Lily's body, saw him pick up the baby, saw the decision, the instinctive, ungoverned, desperate decision to take the child and run. He saw himself. Harry, at 2, at 5, at 8, at 11, eating porridge, stirring potions, producing his first Patronus, calling Snape parent in the hospital wing and watching the word land like a blow. He saw the conversations with Dumbledore, the plans, the conditions, the terrible mathematical, cold-blooded reality of a war fought through manipulation and sacrifice. "You have used me," Snape said to Dumbledore, "in a memory that made Harry's blood run cold. You have used me, and you have used the boy, and you have orchestrated this entire war like a chess game with living pieces. Yes, and the boy, when the time comes, when the Horcrux must be destroyed, the boy must die." Snape's face. The face of a man receiving the worst news of his life. "You have kept him alive so that he can die at the proper moment? Don't tell me now that you've grown to care for the boy." And Snape raised his wand and cast the Patronus, and the silver dome materialized in Dumbledore's office and floated through the air and looked at the headmaster with Lily's eyes. "After all this time?" Dumbledore asked. "Always." Harry pulled out of the pensieve, sat on the floor of the headmaster's office, cried. Not the restrained, controlled tears of a boy who had been taught occlumency and emotional regulation since the age of 7. The raw, devastating, uncontrollable tears of a person who has just understood, for the first time, the full scope of another person's love. Snape had loved his mother, had spent his entire adult life trying to atone for her death, had raised her son, not because he was asked, but because he could not bear to leave Lily's child in a world without protection, had maintained his cover, endured Voldemort's presence, killed Dumbledore, all to protect Harry, all to give Harry the chance to survive what was coming. And now Snape was dying, alone in a shadow. And Harry was sitting in an office, holding stolen memories, understanding everything 14 years too late. Harry walked into the Forbidden Forest. He walked because the Horcrux had to be destroyed, because the fragment of Voldemort's soul in his scar had to be eliminated for Voldemort to become, because this was the thing that Dumbledore had planned and Snape had dreaded and Lily had died to prevent, and that was happening anyway, because prophecies are stubborn things and war does not care about love. But as he walked, he held the resurrection stone, turned it 3 times. His mother appeared. Red hair, green eyes. The photograph come to life. "You've been so brave," Lily said. His father appeared. Messy hair, glasses, the face that Harry saw in mirrors. "We are so proud of you." Sirius appeared, gaunt, haunted, but smiling. And then, and Harry had not expected this, had not thought it possible, a 4th figure materialized, thinner than the others. Darker, standing slightly apart, the way he always stood, the eternal outsider, the man who existed at the margin of every group and at the center of every story. "You're not dead," Harry said. "Not yet," Snape's shade said, "but close. The stone shows more than the dead, Harry, it shows the dying. I'm going to the forest. To die. I know. Will it work? What you believe that Mum's protection will save me? I believe so. I have spent 14 years believing so. But I cannot be certain. That's not reassuring. I am not a reassuring person." Harry, even as a shade, even dying, Snape was exactly himself. "I'm afraid," Harry said. "So am I. You're never afraid. I am always afraid. I have been afraid since the night I picked you up from that crib. Afraid that I would fail you. Afraid that the world would take you. Afraid that everything I did would not be enough." "Was it enough?" Snape looked at him. The shade's face was translucent, but the expression was as clear and real as any expression Snape had ever worn. Not the mask, the real face, the face beneath. "You are standing here," Snape said. "Alive, brave, ready. You are your mother's son, Harry. You are everything she hoped you would be." "And yours?" Something moved across the shade's face. something that was not grief and was not pride and was not love, but was all combined into something new, something that had no name because no one had ever been in this exact position before. And mine, Snape said. Harry walked into the clearing. Voldemort was waiting. Harry Potter, the boy who lived, come to die. The curse came. Green light. Harry did not raise his wand. He died and came back. Because Snape was right. Because the love, because the protection Lily had created was embedded in Harry's being at a level deeper than the Horcrux, deeper than the soul fragment, deeper than death itself. The curse destroyed the Horcrux and spared the host, and Harry Potter woke up on the forest floor with the scar throbbing and the fragment gone, and the knowledge that he was, for the first time in his life, entirely himself. Voldemort fell. The Elder Wand refused to kill its master. Harry ran to the shrieking shack. Snape was still there. Still alive. Barely. The wounds from Nagini were deep, the venom was spreading, and the blood loss was catastrophic. But Snape was a potions master, and he had been carrying an anti-venom in his robes for 2 years, because Snape was a man who prepared for every... And the contingency of being bitten by Voldemort's snake was not one he had overlooked. He had administered the anti-venom the moment Harry left, had stopped the bleeding with a charm, had lain on the floor and waited, because there was nothing else to do, and because Severus Snape had spent his entire life waiting. Harry burst through the door, saw Snape on the floor, fell to his knees. You're alive. Barely. The anti-venom, I brewed it myself. Did you think I would rely on someone else's work? Harry laughed. A real laugh, broken and wet and full of relief. He pulled Snape upright, supported him, helped him to his feet. The Dark Lord? Snape asked. Dead? The Horcrux? Destroyed, you were right. The protection worked. Snape closed his eyes. The relief that passed across his face was so total, so complete, that it transformed him. For one moment, Severus Snape looked like a different person. Not the spy, not the teacher, not the complicated, broken, magnificent man who had spent 20 years atoning for a mistake he made as a teenager. Just a person who had been carrying an impossible weight and had finally been allowed to set it down. She saved you, Snape said. Again, you both did. Snape opened his eyes, looked at Harry. Green eyes met black. I need to tell you something, Snape said. Something I should have said years ago. You don't have to, I do. Because I nearly died without saying it, and that would have been unforgivable. Snape breathed. Once, twice I am proud of you, Harry, not because of the prophecy, not because of the war, because of who you are. You are the best thing I have ever done. The only good thing. And I should have told you that every day, instead of hiding behind discipline and preparation and the pretense that commitment was a substitute for love. It's not a substitute. No, it is not. It is a component. But it is not the whole. And the whole? Snape looked at Harry and said the thing he had never said, the thing he had felt for 14 years and had buried beneath black robes and cutting remarks and the mask of a man who did not know how to be vulnerable. I love you. You are my son in every way that matters, and I am sorry that it took me this long to say it. Harry did not speak. He put his arms around Severus Snape and held him, there in the shrieking shack, surrounded by blood and dust and the echoes of everything that had happened, and Snape, who did not hug, who did not touch, who had spent his entire adult life maintaining the precise distance between himself and everyone else, put his arms around Harry and held him back. They stood there for a long time, not speaking, not needing to, because some things do not need words. Some things are communicated through presence, through the act of being there, through the simple, powerful, irreducible fact of holding someone and being held. Years later, a house in Hogsmeade. Not Spinner's End, that house had been sold, along with its memories and its grey walls and the chair where Snape had held a baby for the first time. The new house was different, warmer, lighter, books everywhere. Of course, Snape would always have books, but arranged alongside photographs and children's drawings and the accumulated debris of a life that was, against all probability, happy. Harry married Ginny Weasley. They had children. James Sirius, who was loud and reckless and reminded Snape of everything he had hated about James Potter, and who managed to charm Snape by calling him grandfather with a grin that was pure Lily. Albus Severus, who was quiet and serious and had green eyes and a talent for potions that made Snape's breath catch. Lily Luna, who was fierce and brilliant and who, at the age of 3, accidentally set Snape's curtains on fire during an argument about bedtime, and was forgiven instantly because Snape could not say no to anyone named Lily. Snape retired from Hogwarts. This was a process that took 3 years, because Snape did not know how to stop and had to be taught, in much the same way that Harry had been taught potions slowly, patiently, with frequent setbacks and occasional explosions. He wrote a book, an encyclopedia of potions that became the definitive text in the field and that contained, on the dedication page, 3 words, for Lily. Always. And on the acknowledgements page, which no one expected because Snape did not acknowledge people, 3 more words, for Harry. Everything. Hermione called it the most emotionally devastating acknowledgements page in published. Ron said it was a lot, coming from the bloke who once described my draught of peace as an insult to the concept of brewing. Harry said nothing. He just read the words and closed the book and put it on the shelf beside Lily's journal and the drawing of the bezoar and the photograph of the woman with red hair. And the shelf was full, and the fullness was the opposite of the emptiness that had defined Spin. And the opposite of emptiness is not just fullness, but meaning. He visited Harry every Sunday. They sat in the kitchen and drank tea and argued about Quidditch and discussed the children's homework and did the thing that parents and children do when the war is over and the grief has settled into something manageable and the love that was always present has finally been allowed to express itself. Albus asked me about his name, Harry said one Sunday afternoon. What did you tell him? I told him he was named after 2 headmasters of Hogwarts. One was the bravest man I ever knew. Dumbledore was many things. Brave is debatable. I wasn't talking about Dumbledore. Snape looked at Harry. The green eyes. Still lilies. Always lilies. But also, now, unmistakably, Harry's. That is the most sentimental thing you have ever said to me. You raised me. Some sentimentality was bound to rub off. I raised you to be disciplined and practical. You raised me to be loved. Snape was quiet. The kitchen was warm. Outside, the children were playing in the garden. Albus was chasing James. Lily was directing operations from the porch with the authority of a tiny general. Yes, Snape said. I suppose I did. They drank their tea. The afternoon light came through the window and touched the table and the cups and the faces of 2 people who had spent 20 years learning to love each other. One awkward, insufficient, extraordinary day. And in Severus Snape's study, on the desk beside the potions encyclopedia and the stack of grandchildren's drawings and the first edition textbook that still contained, pressed between its pages, a drawing of a bezoar done by a 4-year-old boy with green eyes in that study. On the wall hung a photograph. A woman with red hair and green eyes, laughing at something else, beautiful, alive always, and beside it, framed for the first time, hung another photograph. Newer, less faded. Showing a man in black robes sitting in a chair reading with a small boy asleep on his lap. The boy was perhaps 3 years old. His dark hair was messy, it would always be messy. No amount of Snape's attempts to comb it would change that, and his face was pressed against the man, and one small hand was gripping the front of the man's robes. holding on with the fierce, instinctive, unbreakable grip of a child who has found safety and will not let go. The man in the photograph was not looking at the camera, he was looking at the child, and the expression on his face, visible only in the photograph, only in this unguarded, uncurated, completely unperformed moment, was not the mask. It was love. The complicated, insufficient, extraordinary, terrifying, overwhelming, transformative love of a man who did not know how to love and who loved anyway. Who picked up a baby from a crib in a destroyed house and carried it home and spent the next 20 years learning, one awkward, inadequate, magnificent day at a time, what it means to choose someone. Not because of prophecy, not because of duty, not because of guilt, because of a pair of green eyes in a dark room, because of a cry in the night, because of the small, ungovernable, completely irrational decision of a broken man to reach into a crib and lift a child into his arms and refuse, from that moment forward, to put him down. Severus Snape had not been a good man. He had been a complicated man who made terrible choices and spent his life atoning for them. But in one particular matter, in the matter of a boy with green eyes and a lightning scar, he had been something better than good. He had been enough. Let us know what you'd like to see next. There are things the story does not contain. Moments too small for narrative, too quiet for drama. The things that happen between the events, in the spaces where life actually lives. Like the morning Harry turned 7 and Snape made a cake. Not a good cake. Snape was a potions master, not a baker, and the distinction is important because potions require precision and baking requires intuition, and Snape's intuition, at least in the kitchen, was approximately as reliable as a compass in a magnetic storm. The cake was lopsided. The frosting was the wrong colour. Snape had attempted green, for obvious reasons, and had produced something closer to grey. The candles were the standard magical kind that relit themselves after being blown out, which Snape had forgotten about, resulting in Harry spending 7 minutes trying to extinguish 7 candles that refused to die. "This is the worst cake I have ever seen," Harry said, with the devastating honesty of a 7-year-old. "It is the only cake I have ever made. Adjustments will be needed. It tastes like potions ingredients. That is because I substituted baking powder with ground moonstone. They are chemically similar. They are not chemically similar. They are structurally analogous. They are not structurally analogous. Eat the cake, Harry." Harry ate the cake. It was terrible. He ate every bite. And the next year, Snape tried again. And the cake was slightly less terrible. And the year after that, it was almost edible. And by the time Harry turned 10, the cake was genuinely good. Because Snape approached every failure with the same systematic, relentless, slightly obsessive determination that he applied to everything. And because making a birthday cake for a boy you love is not so different from brewing a potion, when you think about it. Both require care. Both require attention. Both are acts of creation performed for someone else's benefit. Both are better with practice. Like the Christmas that Harry was 8 and Snape gave him a book, not just any book, a journal, bound in green leather, with Lily's initials embossed on the cover in gold. It had been Lily's journal from Hogwarts herself, full of observations about charms theory and potions experiments and the political situation and the boy she had started dating, written in a handwriting that was neat and precise and occasionally descended into excited illegibility when the subject was particularly interesting. "Where did you get this?" Harry asked, turning the pages with the reverent care of a child handling sacred text. "In the ruins of Godric's Hollow. The night I brought you home. I went back, after you were asleep. I walked through the house and I collected everything I could find. Photographs, books, personal effects. I put them in a box and I sealed it and I kept it for you." "A box?" Snape went to the closet under the stairs. Not a cupboard. Snape did not put children in cupboards. He put potions ingredients in cupboards, but a closet, narrow and deep, where he kept things that were too important for every day but too painful for display. He brought out a box. Wooden, ordinary, the kind of box you might put tools in, or old letters, or the collected physical remnants of a life that ended too soon. Harry opened it. Lily's Hogwarts scarf, still smelling faintly of the perfume she had worn. James's Quidditch gloves, worn at the fingertips. A set of photographs, not the ones the Wizarding World published, the famous ones, the ones that turned Lily and James into icons. These were private. Lily making a face at the camera. James with ink on his nose, laughing, the two of them together, at what appeared to be a party. James's arm around Lily. Both of them, young and alive, and completely unaware of what was coming. A baby blanket. White, with golden snitches embroidered on it. Harry's blanket, the one he had been wrapped in when Snape found him. Harry held the blanket, pressed it against his face. It did not smell like anything anymore. 14 years had erased whatever scent it once carried. But the act of holding it, of pressing his face into the fabric, was the act of a child reaching across time to touch the parents he never knew. Snape stood in the doorway and watched, and felt the thing that he felt every day, the thing that lived beneath the mask and the black robes and the cutting remarks, the thing that had no name because Snape had never found the right word for the experience of watching a child you love the mother you lost. It was not grief, not pride. It was something else. Something that contained elements of all three but was none of them individually. Something that felt, when he examined it closely, like gratitude. Gratitude that the boy could love someone he had never met. Gratitude that Lily's memory was alive in Harry's heart. Gratitude that the box he had carried from the ruins of Godric's Hollow and that its contents could bridge the gap between the living and the dead. "Thank you," Harry said. Snape nodded, turned, went to the kitchen to make tea. Because that is what Snape did when emotions threatened to overwhelm him. He made tea. Because tea was a potion, and potions were manageable, and manageable was the best Snape could do. Like the night Harry was 12, and not the Voldemort nightmare those had been managed through occlumency, contained behind the walls that Snape had helped Harry build, reduced from screaming terror to a distant, muffled unease that could be endured. This was a different nightmare. A normal one. A 12-year-old's nightmare about failing, about being alone, about the people he loved disappearing. Harry woke up crying in the dormitory at Hogwarts, in the middle of the night, in a room full of sleeping boys who would not understand. He left the dormitory, walked through the castle, not to Dumbledore's office, not to McGonagall, to the dungeons, to the door of Snape's private quarters, which he knocked on at 3 a.m, knowing that Snape would answer because Snape always answered, because Snape had told him on the first night of first year, "If you need me, come to me." Whatever the hour, whatever the reason. Snape opened the door, saw Harry's face, did not ask why, simply stepped aside. Harry sat in his chair. Snape made tea. They sat in silence for 20 minutes. The fire crackled. The tea cooled. The castle was quiet. "Bad dream?" Snape asked. "Yeah, the Dark Lord? No, just regular bad. Regular bad. I dreamed you were gone, that I came to your office and it was empty, that you had left, and no one knew where you were, and I was..." Snape set down his cup. "I am not going anywhere," he said. "Everyone goes somewhere eventually. Eventually is not tonight. Tonight, I am here. I am sitting in this chair drinking this tea, which is overbrewed because I was distracted by a knock at the door, and I am not going anywhere. Promise? I do not make promises. Promises are for people who need external enforcement for their commitments. That is sufficient." Harry looked at him and smiled. The smile was small and watery and 12 years old and exactly Lily's. That's the most Snape way of saying I promise that I've ever heard. Then you understand me perfectly. They finished their tea. Harry went back to the dormitory. Snape sat in the chair for another hour, staring at the fire, feeling the warmth. Not going anywhere. Not tonight. Not ever. Like the conversation after 5th year, when Harry came home to Spinner's End for the last time. The house was the same. Small, dark, cramped with books. The chair where Snape had held him as a baby. The kitchen where he had brewed his first potion. The bedroom where Lily's photograph still stood on the bedside. But Harry was different. 15, taller than Snape now, his voice deeper, his face sharper. The child was gone. The young man was present. And the distance between the two, the gap that had been crossed in 1,000 small moments over 14 years, was visible in the way Harry moved through the house. Not as a guest, not as a resident, as a person returning to the place that made them. I'm going to miss this house, Harry said. It is a terrible house. It's the only home I've ever had. Snape looked at the sitting room, at the leaking armchairs, and the overloaded bookshelf, and the fireplace that did not draw properly, and the window that rattled in the wind. When I brought you here, Snape said, I thought it was temporary. I thought Dumbledore would find a better arrangement. Someone who knew how to raise a child. You knew how to raise a child. I knew how to brew potions and teach occlumency and criticize student essays. I did not know how to make a birthday cake or soothe a nightmare or answer the question, why don't the neighbours like us, in a way that did not involve a 15-minute lecture on the sociology of Muggle prejudice. The sociology lecture was very informative. You were 5. I was a precocious 5. You were an impossible 5. You argued with everything I said. You questioned every instruction. You refused to eat porridge on a Tuesday for reasons that you could not articulate and that I could not resolve. I don't like porridge on Tuesdays. That is not a reason. It's my reason. Snape looked at Harry, at the green eyes, at the young man who was, despite everything, despite the war and the prophecy and the Horcrux, and the 14 years of being raised by the most emotionally constipated wizard in Britain happy. Functional, brave, kind, whole. I did not know how to raise a child, Snape said. But I learned. You did. You were patient with me. You were patient with me first. I was not patient. Patience and terror are not the same thing. Although they produce similar behaviour, both involve sitting very still and trying not to make sudden movements. Harry laughed. The laugh filled the small sitting room, bounced off the books and the leaking armchairs and the window that rattled in the wind. I love you, Harry said. I know you find the words. I know you'd rather I expressed it through academic achievement or potion brewing or whatever metric you consider appropriate. But I love you. And I need you to know that, because the world is about to get very dark, and I want to make sure we've said the important things. Snape was quiet. The fire crackled. The house settled around them, the small, dark, cramped house that had been, for 4, the improbable, insufficient, extraordinary setting for the most important relationship of both their lives. I know, Snape said. I have always known. That's not the same as hearing it. No, it is not. He paused. I love you too. The words are inadequate. They do not capture the scope of what I feel. But they are the best the language offers, and I will not pretend that a better vocabulary would make me more comfortable. Was that physically painful to say? Excruciating. I appreciate the effort. You should. It will not be repeated. It doesn't need to be. Once is enough. They sat in the house on Spinner's End, the man and the boy he had raised, and outside the window the evening was coming on, and the street was grey, and the mill and the world was about to burn. But tonight, the fire was warm, and the tea was brewed, and the words had been said. Tonight, that was enough. It had always been.